We crossed the border in late November, 1939. The officers told us it would be quick, a march, not a war. The Finns would crumble before the might of the Red Army. That's what they said. That's what we all wanted to believe as we piled into frozen trucks and rickety sledges, rifles slung across shoulders, frost already clinging to our greatcoats before we had even left Leningrad. The cold was like nothing I'd ever felt. I was born near Novgorod, where winters can be cruel, but this was different. This was a silence that cut through you, a frost that didn't just bite your skin, but seemed to bury itself in your bones. The land itself was an enemy. Endless forests of pine and birch, snow so deep it swallowed boots to the knees, skies the color of iron. The Finns knew this country. We did not. At first, morale was high. Our commanders barked promises of swift victory, and some men even sang as we trudged down narrow forest roads. But songs die fast when you can no longer feel your fingers. By the third day, our breath froze on our scarves in thick white crusts, and our rifles grew stiff with ice. The trucks broke down, and horses began collapsing in the drifts. We cursed the cold, cursed Finland, cursed Stalin for sending us here. The forests pressed in close on both sides of the road, tall black silhouettes against the pale sky. The men muttered that they could feel eyes watching from between the trees. At first, I thought it was just fear of Finnish snipers. But soon, the whispers started. It was Petrov, a wiry man from Smolensk, who first told me the stories. We were on night watch together, stamping our boots to keep blood in our toes, rifles hugged to our chests, for warmth more than defense. The moon hung low, casting long silver shadows across the snow. "You know what the Finns believe?" Petrov asked, his voice muffled through his scarf. I shook my head, teeth chattering. "They say these forests are alive, that they have guardians, spirits, demons, whatever you want to call them. The Metsa Haltija, the forest keepers. If you anger them, you vanish. No body, no sound, just gone." I laughed, though not with much strength. "Spirits don't kill men. Bullets do." Petrov spat into the snow. "Tell that to the patrol that went missing last night." He didn't need to explain. We all knew. A group of scouts had gone ahead down the road. By dawn, only their rifles had been found, sticking up from the snow like grave markers, their tracks leading nowhere. Some said the Finns had ambushed them and carried off the bodies. Others whispered that the men had walked willingly into the forest, following voices in the dark. The officers called it nonsense. They shouted that anyone caught spreading fairy tales would be shot for panic-mongering. But discipline doesn't stop whispers. Around every fire, men muttered about shadows moving in the tree line, about low whistling sounds when the wind was still. One swore he had seen a tall, pale figure standing between the pines, watching. By the time he blinked, it was gone. That night, I couldn't sleep. The fire burned low, and the trees beyond the circle of light loomed taller than cathedrals. The snow reflected the moon so brightly it hurt to stare at it. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, then went silent. My breath plumed white as I stared at the tree line. The longer I looked, the more it seemed the shadows shifted, as if something stood among them, patient and still. Then I heard it, a whistle, high and thin, not wind, not bird, and it was calling my name. I jolted upright, rifle in my hands, heart hammering. But the camp was silent. The men snored, bundled in their coats, steam rising from their mouths. Only the snow stirred, drifting gently, silently, yet the sound lingered, faint, fading back into the forest. I told myself it was exhaustion, or the wind in the branches, but I did not close my eyes again that night. By morning, one man was gone. His bedroll lay neatly folded, boots missing, rifle propped carefully against a tree. No tracks in the snow led away from camp, just emptiness. The officers said deserter, but Petrov only muttered, "No, he was taken." And though I tried to laugh, I could not stop looking at the trees, at the pale gaps between trunks where the snow seemed to shift and breathe. For the first time, I wondered if the real enemy here wasn't the Finns at all. The first shots came just after dawn. We were trudging down a narrow forest road, rifles slung, breath steaming in clouds. The snow was so deep, the men at the front looked like they were wading through a frozen river. The birches stood in perfect ranks, their white bark blending with the sky, making the forest feel endless and hollow. Then came the crack of a rifle, sharp and clean. The man 2 paces ahead of me dropped without a sound, a neat hole punched through his neck. He pitched forward into the snow, blood already freezing on his collar. "Snipers!" someone screamed. Chaos erupted. We dove into the drifts, fumbling for rifles, our breath tearing in our throats. The officers shouted, but their words were swallowed by gunfire and the terrifying silence between shots. The Finns moved like ghosts. You never saw them. You only saw the snow spray as bullets struck, only glimpsed a white parka or the sweep of skis vanishing into the trees. We fired wildly into the pines, bullets splintering bark, but the forest just swallowed our rage. Mortars thumped, shells burst snow and branches into the air, but still the shots came, precise and patient. It felt less like battle and more like being hunted. By midday, the firing slowed. The Finns had melted back into the forest. We crept out of the drifts, shivering, faces raw with frost. We gathered the dead. There were too many. Frozen hands clutched rifles, eyes wide and rimmed with ice. Some men we couldn't move. Their blood had frozen them to the ground. But there were others, different. I found Petrov kneeling over a body near the tree line, his breath ragged. "Look," he whispered. The soldier's chest was torn open, but not like from shrapnel. It looked as though something had ripped through his rib cage from the inside. The bones were cracked outward, his face frozen in a silent scream. There were no bullet holes, no burns, nothing a Finnish rifle could do. Another body was nearby, slumped against a tree. His throat was shredded, not cut, not clean, but ragged, as though gnawed. Snow around him was pink and already crusting with ice. The officers barked that it was mortar fire. "Blast injuries," they said. But I had seen blast wounds in training, and nothing human could leave wounds like these. As we moved deeper to collect the fallen, we found tracks. At first they looked like ski trails, faint grooves in the snow, but they were wrong. Too wide, too deep, the stride impossibly long, and there were no boot prints, no poles, just smooth, heavy impressions stretching off into the forest, curving between the trees where no skis could go. A group of men followed them a short distance, but returned pale and silent, refusing to speak. That night, we camped in silence. No songs, no jokes. The firelight barely seemed to push back the dark. I sat with Petrov, both of us staring at the blackness between the trees. "You saw those bodies," he said quietly. I nodded. That wasn't the Finns. That was something else, I tried to argue, but my words died. Because in truth, I felt it too. It was in the silence, in the way the forest seemed to breathe when the wind was still. Later, as I tried to sleep, I heard something. Not gunfire, not the whistle of wind. A crunch, slow, deliberate. Snow compacting under a weight too heavy for man or beast. I froze, clutching my rifle, eyes fixed on the tent flap. Shadows moved just beyond the canvas, tall and thin, swaying gently like trees in a breeze. Then, a whisper. Not Russian, not Finnish. Something older, stretched, almost a song. By the time I pushed outside, nothing was there. Only the vast white silence and the pines standing still as death. At dawn, another man was missing. His bedroll was untouched, rifle still beside it. No tracks in the snow. The officers swore he'd deserted, but Petrov leaned close and whispered, "No, he was taken." And though I tried to laugh, my voice caught in my throat, because in my bones, I knew Petrov was right. We were not alone in this forest. The nights grew longer. It felt as though the sun itself had abandoned us. The pale daylight lasted only a few hours before sinking behind the black line of the forest, leaving us in a frozen darkness that seemed alive. The cold gnawed without mercy. Fires barely warmed our hands before being smothered by wind. Some men rubbed snow into their skin to stay awake, afraid that if they slept, they would not wake again. We were ordered to pitch tents in a clearing, canvas snapping in the wind, rifles stacked close at hand. The Finns might come at any hour, but it wasn't the Finns that kept us awake. It began with voices. The first night, I heard my name called from the tree line, clear, certain, like my mother calling me home when I was a boy. I leapt up, heart pounding, rifle clutched in frozen hands. But when I stumbled into the snow, there was only the wind curling through the birches. Petrov admitted later he had heard his sister's voice the same night. Others muttered the same, whispers of wives, brothers, lost friends, calling them from the forest. One man, Grigory, swore he saw his dead father standing at the edge of camp, half shrouded in snow. When he ran toward him, the figure simply melted into the trees. Dreams began to plague us. Men woke screaming of tall shapes standing in their tents, of long fingers brushing their faces. I too dreamed, always the same, a white field stretching forever, no sky, no ground, just endless pale nothing. And in the distance, a tall shadow, thin as a birch tree, swaying gently, always watching, always waiting. I stopped sleeping more than an hour at a time. Exhaustion turned our camp into a madhouse. Men fought over scraps of bread, accused one another of desertion, of cowardice. The commander barked threats, pistol flashing, but his own eyes were hollow, sleepless. The forest grew crueler with each passing night. One evening, while on watch, I heard it again, the whistle. High, sharp, like a bird, but wrong. It rose and fell in strange patterns, almost like words. I gripped my rifle, teeth clenched, staring into the dark. Then I saw them. Eyes. Dozens of them. Pale, reflective, like animals caught in a lantern beam. But higher. Too high. Nearly level with the branches. They swayed slightly, as though whatever bore them was tall. Impossibly tall. I fired without thinking. The shot cracked through the night. The eyes vanished instantly. The camp stirred, men tumbling from tents, shouting, rifles raised. But the forest was empty again, silent except for the hiss of wind. The commander roared at me, called me mad, threatened punishment. But I saw what I saw. The next morning, we sent out a patrol. 5 men to sweep the perimeter, search for Finnish tracks. Hours passed. They did not return. By dusk, only their rifles were found, stuck upright in the snow in a neat circle, barrels pointing skyward like a strange ritual. There were no footprints around them, just snow, untouched. The commander ordered the rifles collected, but the men refused. Not one dared cross that line. The weapons still stand there in my memory, 5 silent markers against the endless white. That night, a storm rolled in. Snow swept across the camp, choking our fires, rattling the tents like paper. I tried to bury myself in my coat, but the whispers came again, louder now, closer. They no longer sounded like my mother. They sounded like me, my own voice, calling from the trees, over and over. Petrov clutched my arm, eyes wide, lips trembling. "It's learning," he muttered. "It knows us now." By dawn, another man was gone, his bedroll empty, boots missing, rifle propped carefully against a tent pole. No tracks, no sound, nothing but the pale trees swaying gently in the cold wind. The commander barked that the man deserted, but no one believed him, not anymore. We were trapped in a frozen forest that hated us, haunted by something we could not see, could not fight. And each night, it drew closer. By the 4th week, we no longer spoke of the Finns. It was the cold, the hunger, and it that ruled our thoughts. The commanders still insisted our enemy wore white parkas and skied on silent feet, but the men knew better. The Finns were flesh and blood. What stalked us in the night was not. We built the fires higher, as if flame alone could protect us. Great heaps of wood dragged from the forest, smoke choking our lungs, sparks hissing into the snow. But the firelight only showed us how little of the world we truly saw. Beyond its glow, the forest pressed in like a wall of black. That was where the eyes lived. It was Mikhail who saw them first that night. He was a boy from the Urals, barely 18, soft-faced and still clumsy with his rifle. He pointed toward the tree line, his voice thin with terror. "There! Look!" We turned, rifles ready, and there they were. Dozens of pale orbs hung in the darkness, hovering just beyond the fire's reach. They blinked in unison, glimmering like shards of glass. Too high, too many. My stomach twisted. The commander barked, "Animals!" Wolves. But we all knew better. Wolves don't stand taller than men. Wolves don't watch without moving. Wolves don't vanish the instant you blink. Panic spread like fire in dry grass. One man opened up with his DP-28 light machine gun, spraying the tree line with a deafening roar. Snow and bark exploded. Smoke filled the air. When it cleared, the eyes were gone. But so was Mikhail. We found his rifle in the snow, dropped just behind the fire ring. No footprints led away. No sound had been made. He was there one moment, gone the next. That night, no one slept. Some sat muttering prayers under their breath, orthodox words mixed with half-remembered peasant charms. One man tied bits of cloth around his fingers for luck. Another clutched his mother's icon so tightly it cut into his palm. Petrov sat beside me, rocking slightly, eyes fixed on the fire. "It doesn't need to kill all of us," he whispered. "Just enough. Just enough to keep us afraid." I wanted to tell him to be quiet, but he was right. The fear itself was killing us, hollowing us out like the cold did. The next evening, the commander ordered double guards. I was paired with Petrov again, rifles across our laps, the fire crackling low between us. The forest was silent, not silent like peace, but silent like a held breath. Every now and then, a branch cracked somewhere deep among the trees, not falling wood, not snow, footsteps, slow, heavy, always moving,
never approaching. Then came the whistle, high, thin, too sharp to be wind. It circled the camp, darting between trees, echoing. Sometimes it sounded like a bird, sometimes like a human voice stretched too far. At one point I could swear I heard my own laugh carried through the forest. Petrov clutched my sleeve, his face white. "Do you hear it?" he whispered. I nodded, throat too dry to answer. Around midnight, something happened that broke us. One of the guards across camp screamed. We spun and saw him firing into the dark, wild-eyed. Men rushed to him, dragging him back toward the fire. He kicked, shouted, pointed. "She was out there," he cried. "My wife." She was calling me. The commander struck him hard, snarling that he was a coward, that he imagined it. But as the man wept, I looked beyond him, just for an instant, and I swear I saw her too. A woman in a thin dress, hair drifting in the wind, standing between two pines, pale, still, watching. When I blinked, she was gone. By morning, 2 more were missing. No sign of struggle. Their bedrolls neatly folded, rifles left propped upright. The commander called them deserters, but even he avoided looking at the tree line. That day, Petrov said something that chilled me more than the cold ever could. We were huddled by the fire, snow drifting in, men silent and hollow. He leaned close and whispered, "What if it doesn't live in the forest? What if it lives in us now?" I had no answer, but when I looked down at my hands, trembling though the fire was warm, I wondered if he was right.
By then, the camp stank of death. The cold preserved the bodies, but nothing can hide the smell of blood soaked into canvas and wool. We had lost too many in too few days. The commander finally ordered us to dig graves. "We're soldiers, not savages," he barked. "The men will be buried with dignity." Dignity, in snow frozen harder than stone. We hacked at the ground with shovels, picks, even bayonets, but the earth would not yield. The frost was deeper than we were strong, so we built shallow pits, piling snow and pine branches over the dead. It felt wrong, unfinished. Some men made the sign of the cross. Others turned away, ashamed. That night, a storm rolled in. Snow swallowed the camp. We thought at least the graves would be safe, hidden under the drifts. But in the morning, they were open. I will never forget it. The pits were torn wide. The snow churned as if something had clawed upward from beneath. The corpses lay scattered across the clearing, half buried in white, arms outstretched, eyes still open. One man's face was gone, gnawed down to bone. Another's chest was hollowed, ribs snapped like kindling. The commander claimed animals had done it. Wolves, ravens. But there were no tracks, no feathers, no prints. Only the same smooth, wide impressions leading into the forest. The impossible tracks we had seen before. Petrov knelt beside one of the bodies, his lips trembling. "They don't want them buried," he whispered. "They want them here, with us." That day the men worked in silence, dragging the corpses back into the pits, piling snow higher, cutting fresh branches. No one spoke. No one looked each other in the eye. But that night, I was woken by footsteps, soft, deliberate, circling the camp. I sat up, rifle in hand, ears straining. The fire was low, just embers glowing red. Shadows moved between the trees. Then I saw it. A man, one of ours, standing in the mist just beyond the firelight. His greatcoat hung open, chest torn wide. His face was pale, eyes cloudy and blank. He swayed gently, as though moved by a breeze that did not touch the trees. I froze. My mind screamed to raise my rifle, but my arms felt made of stone. "Do you see him?" Petrov hissed from beside me. His face was as white as the snow. I nodded. We blinked, and the figure was gone. The next morning, one of the graves was open again. The same soldier. Gone. The commander raged, shouted that deserters had dug him up, that Finns had stolen the body for tricks. But his voice cracked when he said it. He didn't believe his own words. None of us did. That night, the whispers grew worse. They didn't just come from the forest now. They came from the graves, from the snow. Low murmurs, half-formed words rising beneath the drifts. Men swore they heard their names whispered in the dead voices of comrades. I sat by the fire, staring into the mist, when I felt a hand brush my shoulder. Cold, heavy. I spun, rifle raised. No one was there. But in the snow behind me, a single set of prints led away. Bare footprints, long, deep, fading into the trees. We stopped burying our dead after that. We left them where they fell, rifles across their chests, eyes open to the sky. It felt cruel, but safer somehow. To bury them was to invite it to come for them. To keep them above ground was to accept the truth. Nothing in these forests stayed buried. Petrov said it best one night, his face lit orange by the fire. He leaned close and whispered, "The forest doesn't just take the living. It takes the dead too, and it gives them back." Changed, I wanted to argue, to laugh, to tell him he was mad. But I couldn't, because deep down, I feared he was right. And in that moment, I realized the truth. We were no longer fighting the Finns. We were fighting the forest itself. By December, the snow was so deep we could hardly march. Horses died in their traces. Trucks froze into useless hulks. The forest grew wilder, the sky heavier. We became like ghosts ourselves, stumbling in endless white, wrapped in rags and silence. The Finns still struck us now and then, ski troops darting out of nowhere, rifles flashing, then gone again. But even their raids felt less terrifying than what we knew lingered behind us. At least the Finns bled when hit. At least the Finns left tracks you could follow. This other thing, it left only whispers and fear. We were ordered to march deeper into the forest, toward a supply road. Snow blinded us, needles lashed our faces, boots sank to the knees. I fell behind, cursing my rifle's weight. That's when I felt it. Not sound, not sight, a pressure, a presence. I turned, and there, between the birches, I saw it. Tall, too tall. Its body pale as the snow, so thin it seemed stretched. Arms impossibly long. No face, only smooth whiteness where eyes and mouth should have been. Yet I felt it watching me. I froze, unable to breathe. The thing tilted its head, slow as a tree swaying in the wind. Then it stepped sideways between two trunks and was gone. When I stumbled back into the column, Petrov grabbed my arm. His face was drained of blood. "You saw it, didn't you?" I couldn't speak. I just nodded. That night, we circled our fires closer. The commander tried to insist discipline would save us, but no one listened anymore. The only order we followed was to survive the dark. Around midnight, the wind died. The silence was so heavy it rang in my ears. That's when the machine gunner, Antonov, hissed, "Look!" We turned. The trees at the edge of the firelight were full of eyes again. Dozens, shining pale green. But this time, one of them stepped forward. The flames licked across its body, revealing it in full. A towering figure, its limbs too long, its torso gaunt and crooked. Its head bent low, featureless, but for the suggestion of hollows where eyes should be.
Its skin, if it was skin, rippled like snow under moonlight. The men screamed. Rifles cracked. Machine guns roared. The fire line lit up with bullets. Snow exploded. Branches shattered. But the thing didn't fall. It only swayed, then stepped back, melting into the trees. When the smoke cleared, the forest was silent again. But 4 men were gone. Their rifles lay in the snow, their bedrolls untouched. The commander broke that night. He fired his pistol into the trees, screaming at the shadows, cursing Stalin, cursing Finland, cursing whatever gods had cursed us. When his pistol clicked empty, he dropped to his knees and wept. No one stopped him. No one dared. The next day, as we marched, we saw it again, always just out of reach, moving through the trees parallel to us, sometimes 1, sometimes 2, never close enough to touch, never far enough to forget. Their strides were too long for men, their bodies bending unnaturally as they moved. Petrov muttered under his breath as he marched, "They're herding us, like cattle," and I believed him. That evening, I was on watch when the whisper came again. Not words, a hum, low, rhythmic, almost soothing. It circled the camp, threading through the tents. Some men stirred, muttered, their eyes rolling under closed lids. One sat up and began to walk toward the trees, his steps slow, dreamy, as though sleepwalking. I leapt up, grabbed his arm. His eyes were wide open but empty, white as ice. He whispered a single word, "Home." I shook him until he collapsed in the snow, shivering. When he came to, he had no memory of it. By now, the men refused to sleep. They sat clutching rifles, faces gray, lips cracked. Hunger gnawed at us. Frostbite blackened fingers. But none of it mattered compared to the thing in the trees, because now we knew its shape. And worse, we knew it was not hunting us in rage or hunger. It was watching us, studying us, waiting. The blizzard arrived without warning. One moment, the sky was steel gray and still. The next, the wind howled like 1,000 wolves, driving snow sideways, choking the fires, blinding our eyes. The forest vanished. The world shrank to the few meters of swirling white around us. We tried to pitch tents, but the canvas tore from our hands. Fires died the instant they were lit. We huddled in groups, backs to the wind, snow piling on our coats until we looked like statues. The storm did not last hours. It lasted days. Food froze into bricks we could not chew. Canteens became solid ice. We licked snow to wet our throats, though the officers warned it would kill us faster. Some men laughed at that, laughed until they choked. Laughter sharp and broken, like glass grinding in the wind. It was in that white blindness that we lost what little sanity remained. Men fired at shadows whipped up by snow. Some swore they saw figures walking calmly through the storm, tall and pale, untouched by the wind. Others muttered prayers, rocking like children. The commander had gone silent, eyes hollow, lips moving but no words escaping. He clutched his pistol like a talisman, never firing, only gripping until his knuckles cracked. Petrov was the worst. He began to whisper constantly, muttering nonsense, scraps of lullabies, lines of scripture. Once I caught him smiling at the storm. "It speaks to me," he said, teeth rimmed with ice. "It promises warmth. A place without hunger." On the 3rd night of the blizzard, one of the men rose without a word. He stripped off his coat, his gloves, even his boots, folding them neatly beside the fireless pit. Then, barefoot and bare-chested, he walked into the storm. We shouted, chased him, but the snow swallowed him whole. When we searched the next morning, all we found was his clothes,
stacked carefully under a birch tree. No footprints led away, only the same smooth impressions we had seen before. That broke us more than death ever could. The whispers grew louder in the storm. They came with the wind, curling into our ears. Some sounded like our own voices, some like our families, some like nothing human at all, drawn-out syllables, bending and cracking like frozen wood. I stopped trusting my ears. Even my own name sounded strange when I spoke it. At night, when I tried to sleep buried in snow for warmth, I dreamed of endless white. The shadow was always there, closer now. I saw its long arms reaching toward me, fingers brushing my chest. I woke gasping, clutching at my ribs, certain I would find them cracked open. On the 5th day, the blizzard calmed, but silence was worse than storm. Snowdrifts buried half the camp. Some tents were gone, smothered. 2 men had frozen stiff where they sat, their bodies curled, faces serene as if asleep. And then we saw the tracks. Not our boots, not skis. The wide, heavy impressions stretched across the clearing, weaving between our shelters. They had been there while we slept, while the wind screamed. The thing had walked among us, leaving its mark in the snow, as if to remind us, "You cannot stop me." That morning, the commander finally broke. He stood on a drift, pistol raised, and screamed into the trees, "Enough! Show yourself, coward! I am a soldier of the Red Army. I will not." The words died, because we all saw it. Through the thinning mist, a figure towered between the birches, pale, still, watching, arms dangling like ropes, its head tilted in that unnatural swaying way. The commander fired until the pistol clicked dry. Snow burst, trees splintered, but the thing did not move. When the smoke cleared, it was gone. The commander dropped to his knees. He did not rise again. That night, I sat awake with Petrov. His face was gaunt, eyes rimmed with frost, lips cracked. He stared into the fireless dark. "They don't kill us all at once," he whispered. "They're playing with us." Like cats with mice, I wanted to deny it, to tell him he was mad. But deep down, I knew the truth. The storm had stripped us bare, and whatever lived in these forests was closer than ever, watching, waiting, choosing who to take next. When the storm passed, there were fewer of us. Out of the 40 who had crossed the border weeks before, barely a dozen remained. The rest had frozen, vanished, or been taken. We no longer spoke of deserters. The word meant nothing here. No one would choose this. The commander was dead. His pistol lay in the snow where he dropped it, black metal already rimed with frost. Leadership passed by default to an older sergeant, Karpov, a broad-shouldered man with a scar across his chin. He tried to hold us together, barking orders, cursing Stalin and the devil alike. But even his voice cracked at night. We set up a perimeter in a clearing, stacking wood into great pyres. Fires blazed in all directions, the light stabbing into the trees. Smoke drifted above the pines, visible for miles. We didn't care if it gave away our position. Better to burn bright and die here than vanish one by one in the dark. Petrov and I dragged branches until our hands bled. My fingers had black spots now, frostbite creeping deeper. I could barely feel the rifle slung across my chest. But still we worked. Still we fed the flames. Fire was the only thing left between us and the thing that watched. The first night, the forest answered. From every direction came the whispers, not one voice, but many. They circled the clearing, rising and falling like a chant. Some voices were our own. Some were those of the dead. I swear I heard Mikhail laughing, though I had seen his rifle in the snow days ago. The men clutched their weapons, eyes darting. Sweat froze on foreheads. Karpov shouted at us to stay steady, but his hands trembled. Then we saw them. Shapes at the tree line. Tall, thin. Too many joints, limbs swaying in the smoke. Their eyes glowed like embers. Dozens of them, ringed around the clearing, swaying with the firelight as if in mockery. No orders were given. We fired. Bullets ripped through the trees. Flames roared higher. Snow burst. Branches shattered. The shapes dissolved into smoke and dark. But when the gunfire ceased, the whispers returned. Louder, mocking. The shapes were closer now. One man snapped. He screamed, dropped his rifle, and ran straight into the trees. We heard his cries for a few seconds, then nothing. Just silence. Petrov grabbed my arm so hard his nails dug into my skin. "Don't look at them," he hissed. "That's how they take you." Don't look. But I couldn't help myself. My eyes fixed on one shape standing at the far side of the fire. Its head tilted slowly, unnaturally. I felt its gaze, though it had no face, pour through me, stripping me bare. My heart thundered. My body felt like it was being pulled forward, step by step, toward the flames. Petrov shook me until the spell broke. I fell to my knees, gasping. By dawn, only 9 of us remained. The rest had gone into the trees or collapsed in terror. Their rifles and bedrolls stood as grim markers in the snow. We didn't bury them. We didn't even speak their names. The second night, Karpov ordered us into a tighter ring. "Stay close," he growled. "If one moves, the rest fire." His voice was raw, desperate. The shapes returned again, circling. This time, they didn't stay beyond the firelight. They pressed closer, shadows stretching long across the snow. Their whispers rattled through our bones. My teeth chattered, though I wasn't cold. One man raised a grenade, pulled the pin, and hurled it into the trees. The blast shook the forest. For a moment, silence, then laughter. Dozens of voices, high and broken, laughing in unison. Karpov broke. He dropped his rifle and sank into the snow, covering his ears, rocking like a child. The rest of us stared at him, too afraid to move, too afraid to speak. Petrov whispered, "It wants us like this. Terrified. Alone. That's how it feeds." By the third night, we no longer believed survival was possible. The fires were low. Ammunition was nearly gone. The shapes were closer than ever, their whispers constant. Sleep was impossible. Hunger was unbearable. But it wasn't the cold or the fins that would finish us. It was the thing in the white silence, waiting for the moment we lost the last thread of courage. It happened on the coldest night of them all. The fires were dying, fuel long spent. Ammunition was nearly gone. We sat in silence, 9 men broken into husks, staring into the last flicker of flame. The whispers had not stopped for days. They had become part of the air itself, weaving through our thoughts until we could no longer tell which were our own and which were theirs. I remember staring at my hands, thin and cracked, nails black with frostbite. My rifle lay across my lap, a useless weight. Petrov sat beside me, muttering to himself. "It ends tonight," he whispered, over and over. "Tonight it comes." He was right. It began with the laughter. Not human laughter, though it carried the sound of it. A jagged chorus, high and low, echoing from every direction. We clutched our rifles, eyes darting to the tree line. Shapes swayed just beyond the dying firelight. Dozens of them, too many to count. Their pale eyes glowed like lanterns, blinking in rhythm. Karpov tried to give an order, but his voice broke into a sob. He raised his rifle, fired one shot into the dark. The echo had barely faded when the fire went out. Darkness swallowed us whole. Chaos. Men screamed, fired blindly into the night. Muzzles flashed, illuminating glimpses of tall, pale limbs sweeping through the camp. Something struck Antonov, hurling him into the trees. His scream cut short with a crack of bones. Another man vanished mid-shot, his rifle clattering to the snow. I saw them, figures moving with impossible speed, their arms too long, fingers like roots tearing through canvas and flesh alike. They seemed to slide rather than walk, their forms half hidden in the storm of snow they carried with them. Blood sprayed across the drifts, steaming before it froze. The clearing became a blur of fire and shadow, rifles cracking, men crying out. The snow was no longer white, it was red. I remember one moment in terrible clarity. A shape loomed before me, taller than two men, head tilting down as it leaned close. Its face was blank, but from somewhere inside it came a low hum, vibrating my bones. My body refused to move. My rifle felt like stone in my hands. It reached for me. Long fingers brushed my chest. My heart stopped. I swear it stopped. My vision went black. Then Petrov tackled me, shoving me aside. He fired point blank into the thing's torso, the muzzle flash lighting its pale skin. The bullet ripped through, but the thing did not bleed. It only staggered, then tilted its head toward Petrov. Petrov screamed, not in pain but in despair, as though his soul had been exposed. Then the thing swept its arm, and he was gone, dragged into the snow with a force that left only a long red smear behind. I don't know how long the attack lasted. Minutes, hours, time lost all meaning. Men fell one after another, their cries torn away into the black sky. Some fled into the trees, their screams echoing until silence claimed them too. I crawled beneath a half-collapsed tent, clutching my rifle, heart pounding. The world outside was fire and shadow, snow and blood. The whispers grew deafening, a chorus of voices inside my skull. I heard my mother, my father, voices of comrades already dead. They told me to stand, to walk into the forest, to give myself up. But I stayed. I bit down on my own hand until I tasted blood, forcing myself to remain. When the first grey light of dawn broke, the forest was still. The snow was trampled, stained dark with frozen blood, tents shredded, rifles broken. The fires were ash. I crawled out slowly, ears ringing, eyes burning. I was alone. Bodies lay scattered, but not all. Some men were simply gone, as if the snow had swallowed them whole. Smooth impressions stretched away into the forest, too wide for skis, too long for men. I staggered through the clearing, calling names, hearing only the echo of my own broken voice. There was no answer, no survivors, only me. I do not know why they left me. Perhaps I was beneath their notice. Perhaps they spared me for cruelty, to remember. But as I stood in that clearing, surrounded by silence and blood, I knew one thing. The war had many enemies. The Finns, the frost, the hunger. But what lived in those forests was older, and it was still watching. I don't remember leaving the clearing. One moment I was standing amid the wreckage of our camp, staring at the bloody snow. The next, I was walking, stumbling. My boots dragged through drifts, my rifle bouncing uselessly on my shoulder. I followed no path, no compass, only the grey sky above. Days bled together. I licked icicles, chewed leather straps when hunger burned too sharply. My thoughts drifted like smoke. At night I buried myself in snow for warmth, shivering and listening to the silence. Always the silence. But silence in those forests was never empty. Sometimes I heard footsteps crunching just behind me, too heavy to be a man. Sometimes when I closed my eyes, I felt breath on my neck. Once I woke to see prints circling where I lay, deep and wide, yet untouched by wind. They could have killed me 100 times, but they didn't. That was worse. I don't know how long I wandered before they found me. Soviet reinforcements, men in fresh coats, faces still full, rifles gleaming with oil. They stumbled across me half buried in a drift. At first they thought I was dead. When I coughed blood into the snow, they dragged me upright, muttering about how I was lucky. Lucky. They asked about my unit, where we were stationed, why I was alone. I told them the truth. I told them of the whispers, the eyes in the dark, the tall, pale things that had taken the men. I described the blizzard, the graves torn open, the night of red snow. My voice cracked, my body trembling, but I forced the words out. When I finished, silence hung heavier than the storm ever had. Then the officer laughed, a hard, cold laugh. Hallucinations, he said. Madness from hunger and cold. The others nodded uneasily. One man muttered that I had frostbite in my brain. Another said I should be grateful I was alive. They fed me broth, wrapped me in blankets, and wrote reports. Reports that called me delirious. Reports that explained away 40 vanished men as casualties of Finnish ambushes. The truth was buried, just like the dead. They sent me back to Leningrad after weeks in a field hospital. My frostbitten fingers never fully healed. I could still grip a pen, still write reports, but the rifle was gone from me. The war raged on, but I was kept from the front, shuffling papers in dim offices. They called me fortunate, a survivor. But survival is not freedom. At night I still hear them. Even in the city, where the streets echo with boots and factory sirens, I hear the whispers threading through the dark. When the lamps gutter, I see pale eyes in the alleys. When snow falls, I see long tracks outside my window that no one else notices. Once, in a crowded street, I thought I glimpsed a tall, thin figure swaying between the buildings. I blinked, and it was gone. No one believes me. Perhaps that is the worst curse of all. I think of Petrov often, his ragged laughter, his hand gripping my arm in the dark, his voice whispering, "They don't want to kill us all at once. They're playing with us." I wonder if he knew he would be taken. I wonder if, in that final moment, he understood more than the rest of us. The war will end, someday. All wars do. Men will write books, count victories, bury bones, but the forest will remain, the endless white, the black pines, the silence that breathes, and in that silence, they will still be waiting. I have learned this truth. The enemy we fought in Finland was not only flesh and blood. Something older watched us. Something older played with us. And though I walked away when no one else did, I was not spared. I was chosen to remember.